Hi investigators, Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy with today's program about providing quality investigative services to clients. I better bring up my screen. Okay, so this is part of our 24 hours of live training for CPP30619 in Victoria, and it's information for our students and instructors who are also in Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, Tasmania, Western Australia, Northern Territory, and the ACT as well. So today we're looking at providing quality investigative services. Now, this unit is in relation to identifying client needs and service preferences, delivering quality client services, and reviewing and improving client services. It includes dealing and handling with complaints and issues in the industry. Now, there is a whole web of things there that could happen. You could get complained about as a licensed private investigator to the regulatory authority, the Licensing Regulation Division. Now, they are particularly hard on anyone who gets complained about, and they'll have a disciplinary inquiry where you'll be explaining what you did, and the complainant will be giving their version, you'll be giving your version, and they've got to look at the rules and regulations and the Act and see if you did, as a licensed private investigator, actually transgress that Act. And if you did, you could have your license taken off you. And the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division do that. And so do the Queensland Office of Fair Trading and New South Wales Police Service. Western Australia, they do it as well. So they're there as a regulatory authority to make sure that people don't misbehave as licensed private investigators. Now, you must think, well, they did all these checks and background checks on people. Why would they do that? Well, we'll explain as we go on through this video. So let's have a look at a typical example of something that went wrong in Victoria, and the Licensing Regulation Division took a license off a person. Lady who was a farmer, her husband died, and she lost a herd of cattle. And she lives in the bush, and I don't think the police were real interested for some reason, so she needed it done quite quickly. So she jumped on Gumtree. And on Gumtree, she searched for licensed private investigators. And she probably got 892,000 instant results from that search on Gumtree. And so she rang up a licensed private investigator whose Gumtree ad looked really appealing. So she got Bertie, who's home playing video games, has never done an investigation in his life, but he's got the qualification and a license. He's gone through Centrelink. They've sent him to a $4,000 government-funded 6-week course, and he's attended it, and he's passed it, and he's got his license. And Bertie said, "What's up? How can I help you?" And she said, "Lost all my cattle." He said, "Well, that will be a $30,000 deposit, and I'll go and find them for you." So the lady deposited $30,000 into Bertie's bank account, and that was it. That was it. 3 months later, she hadn't heard from him. So she rang up and said, "Bertie, mate, what's going on? Where's my cattle?" And Bertie said, "Well, it's going to cost you another $20,000. If you just put that into my bank account, I'll do it." Now she said, "Well, that's not good enough. I'm not having that. I've given you $30,000. You haven't even done a thing." "Yeah, I've been really busy. I'm a licensed private investigator in Victoria. Right? You know, I get busy. There's games to play. There's other kids to beat on the games, advertise on Gumtree." So the Licensing Regulation Division received a complaint from the lady whose cattle had gone missing. And they investigated Bertie, and they found he'd done nothing. He just sat home playing video games. He didn't even know where to start. That's how bad his investigation course was, which the government sent him to and paid $4,000 for. So he'd ripped off that lady $30,000. What's unknown if she ever got a cent back, I doubt it. But the Victorian Police Regulation Division took Bertie's license off him for those actions. So they enforce. They really do. And if you think that's bad, that gets a lot worse. And it's not just limited to Victoria, it happens all around Australia. This one, the incredulity is just amazing. Victoria Police Licence. Whoop. Wrong one. Versus Murray is a classic example of the kind of idiotic behaviour that licensing authorities have to deal with. So in the case of AS versus Murray, Murray was on Tinder and he was looking through and he saw AS on Tinder who had a Tinder profile. Now, Murray was a licensed private investigator some years before, and he had interviewed AS, who was married with children. And Murray noticed that this guy was on Tinder putting himself out there. So what Murray did was he pretended he was a lady. And he contacted AS, who's had his name suppressed for marital reasons, and demanded $26,666 in the way of extortion against AS, or Murray would tell, who was pretending to be a lady, not Murray. The lady's name that he used was, hang on, I'll find it in a minute. Can't find it. I'll think of it in a minute. Felicity Jones. So Murray's pretending he is Felicity Jones and he's extorting AS for $26,660, which AS paid. So that's okay, he paid it, and life went on for AS and for Murray as well. So life went on, and then sometime later a further demand was made by Felicity Jones, who is actually Murray, of $40,000. So AS engaged a computer forensics expert to find out what was going on, how this Felicity Jones person was hacking his computer and finding out all about his Tinder profile and that sort of thing. It ended up, it escalated after the IT person found the IP address, and AS's legal representatives did a civil search warrant on the property of Murray, because that linked where his computer was through the phone services. Now, a civil search warrant is called Anton Pillar orders. This was some time ago, a couple of years back, but an Anton Pillar order today, if you're going to do it, it's going to cost you around about $72,000 to have that executed. So they went and knocked on his door, and Murray, who was familiar with the system and a security guard, wouldn't let him in. So that was the first time. But they went back later on and then he cooperated and let them in. So they executed the civil search warrant on Murray's address. And in doing so, they found that he had worked as a private investigator, had investigated AS 4 years previously. He had a file relating to that investigation, but it couldn't be found. They found a thumb drive, and Murray denied that he had any means of accessing the internet with it, but the IP address linked it back every time. So 2 computer towers, 2 memory cards, a laptop were located and impounded, and among material found were copies of a number of emails have been sent to the plaintiff under the name of Felicity Jones. So this all went through the courts, and the court basically ordered that Murray pay restitution or whatever, because this was in New South Wales where they did it, although the extortion emails were sent from Victoria. This was handled in New South Wales. So what you're looking at is the court outcome from that. And he demanded money with menaces, means, you know, he asked for $40,000. He got $26,666 before that, because if he didn't get paid, but he was going to tell AS's wife. So the magistrate went for the side of AS and said, you know, you can't do that. and awarded that all the money had to be paid back by Murray to AS. Murray didn't appear in court. He didn't want to know about that, and the magistrate added exemplary damages to the plaintiff, AS, of $20,000 as well. And he ordered that the costs of the plaintiff to go to court, so to do the search warrant, go to court, the investigation, all that sort of thing, be awarded as well. So that was the order of the court. So the New South Wales court are going to be chasing Murray, aka Felicity Jones, for that money. I don't think they'll ever get it unless Murray wins Tats Lotto and everybody finds out about it. But that's the sort of stuff that licensing authorities have to deal with. And it's a pretty complicated matter, and it's a very serious matter, all because Murray was a licensed private investigator at one stage, and he had interviewed the plaintiff in this matter, AS, over a workers' compensation injury or something like that. There is no guarantee that anyone who becomes a licensed private investigator is going to remain a good citizen, an honest person for the rest of their life. Checks are made by the licensing authority at the time of application, but it doesn't mean that they are never going to go rogue. Now, that's not limited to licensed private investigators. It happens with doctors, nurses, police officers, soldiers. I'm sure it happens in carpet laying and budgerigar breeding as well. But in this case, this is an example of what licensing authorities like the Victorian Police LRD have to deal with. So in dealing with this type of thing, they're dealing with issues about dishonesty, extortion, with demanding money with menaces. That's why they're so hard in relation to the training and the application process of licensed private investigators. They're just two examples of where it's gone wrong. Now, I've sat at meetings attended by the Transport Accident Commission and by WorkSafe in Victoria, and the people in charge of those two organisations have stood up in front of 45 investigators in the room who provide services to them, and they have said to the group, complaints that we get in regard to investigations are absolutely minimal. They are members of an industry association, the AISP. I've seen it probably 8 times that's been told to them by either of those two authorities that they work for. These are legitimate investigators conducting legitimate investigation work, trained legitimately, holding legitimate qualifications, and a member of an industry association. In the case of the two examples you just saw, one never worked as a licensed private. He was never going to. He wasn't a member of an industry association. The other one, he just decided he was going to commit extortion on the spot one day. It was a dumb decision. I don't know how much work he ever did, but he must have done some to interview AS at some stage in relation to a workers' compensation matter. You cannot be charged with anything by the regulatory authority in relation to a licensing issue if you don't have a license. So it's really important that for this qualification, provide quality investigative services to clients in the investigations industry, is to have a license. So in Victoria, this is the process. For that, down in the description area of this video. Once you have logged in, you'll be able to see the choice of forms that you get to fill in. So what we're looking for today is your Victorian Police Private Security Individual Operator Licence application. That's this one here on the list. So we go in, we open up a new form, and it asks us to fill in our name, date of birth, where we're from, any previous names, so if you're married before or something like that, your contact details, your driver's licence number, pretty standard stuff to apply for a private investigator's licence anywhere around the country. So you go through, you save those as you fill them all out. I'm not wasting anybody's time by filling that out today, but that's where you go to the link to apply for that licence. We'll see if we can skip a page. It won't let us, but if we went over the page, it'd ask us which license we want to apply for, whether it's security guard, private investigator, firearms license or close personal protection, whatever it would be. And we fill in that form, and that's how you initially start your application with the Victoria Police. If you do not have a licence to be a private investigator in Victoria, you cannot operate as a private investigator in Victoria. So the first part of providing quality services to clients in Victoria is to get your private investigator's licence. So by becoming licensed, if there's a complaint, the regulatory authority know who the complaint's about, because they can look up the name of that person on their system, and there might be 55 John Smiths. They'll go to the ends of the earth to find the correct one, and they'll make their own inquiries about that and have a disciplinary inquiry if the matter's serious enough. And that's how it works. Now, if there's a vexatious complaint about investigators, they don't have to investigate that. Now, that happens quite often. So what happens is a person might take part in a record of interview for a stolen motor vehicle on a general insurance matter, and that person is not under arrest. They don't have to answer any questions, but they do. They go through all of that. And the investigator then finishes their interview, gives them a copy of the recording of the interview, and submits a report to the insurance company. The insurance company then makes a decision on whether that matter falls within the policy of that was issued to that insured person. If the insured person provided everything that was requested, for example, the mechanical history of the vehicle, the service history of the vehicle, the repayment history of the loan of the vehicle, whatever might have been asked for that was relevant in that matter, if they've supplied it all and the witnesses' statements all match up and everything's found to be okay, the insurance company will pay the claim if it falls within the policy. Now, if it doesn't fall within the policy, they will deny the claim. That's very serious. They might request more information before that. The person's got a right to say no, they don't have to. And they can say, well, when you give us that information, we will then review your claim and probably pay it. But if none of that's provided and it doesn't add up, they deny the claim. So what happens then, the claimant is very upset about it. So they'll make a complaint about the investigator that went and did the interview, and they'll ring up the insurance company or the licensing authority and they'll say, oh, well, Mike Evans came in and interviewed me about my stolen motor vehicle. He said he was an ex-police officer and a karate expert with a black belt, and if I didn't cooperate with him, he was going to do me over. That leaves the investigator in a very vulnerable position if someone says that. But if you go back to the record of interview that was done, at the start of the record of interview, it says, are you partaking in this interview of your own free will? Do you understand you're not under arrest and you can leave at any time? Do you understand you do not have to answer any questions? Are you happy with the way I've explained how this process is going to work? And they'll reply, yes, 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 all the way through that. At the end of it, it says, was any offer or inducement held out to you to take part in this interview? And they will say no. And then there's another question you say at the end, which says, are you happy with the way this interview was conducted? And they will say yes. And then there's another one that says, would you like to add anything else in regards to this matter? Now that's their opportunity where they can say, well, it's all a pack of lies, or whatever they want to say. You said before that you're an ex-police officer and you got a black belt in karate and you're going to deny my claim and bash me up. They could have said that, but they didn't. So that record of interview is reviewed. They look at it. The claimant at the time said they were happy with it. So obviously no threat happened. This person was just upset in the moment when they rang the insurance company and said that. And the insurance company have a recording of it, and they play the recording back to the investigator, and the investigator goes, no, that's not true. No, that didn't happen. What time did that happen? Because if they listen to the recording, which might have gone for an hour and a half, and it's not turned off in that time, or if it is turned off, we'll just halt the recording while someone goes to the toilet or whatever. It's always explained. And the person gave no time of it. They gave no accurate detail of it. They're making it up. They're unreliable. So you do get complaints about you as an investigator that you must be aware of and understand as part of providing quality services to your clients. Police officers get complaints about being police officers. Security guards get complaints about security guards. I think in Victoria, they run around about 35 every weekend. So complaints happen. Now, the idea of this unit is handling those complaints professionally, not being an idiot and moaning and complaining back, right? But handling those complaints. So you must be prepared for it as a business professional. How do you do it? Well, you can join an industry association and they might have a guest speaker on that very subject about business management and how to handle complaints. I'm sure it'd be a topic somewhere along the way. Now, in April last year, a man made a complaint to the federal regulator. That complaint is case ID number 7770145. He made that complaint to ASQA at 2:25 in the afternoon on a day, date and time in April 2020. So his name's there as the witness, his address there, his email address and his telephone number are there, and it's time-stamped by the regulatory authority's system. Now, the regulatory authority failed to follow through on it. Now, when they failed to follow through on it, basically they condoned the behaviour of what the complainant was saying. Now, the complaint that he made in his thinking and confusion was untrue, but where it came from and the trail it left behind is another headache for a regulatory authority. So that headache for the regulatory authority is they now have to, 18 months later, deal with it and find out about it. Because regulatory authorities don't just have the capacity to go and investigate a single investigator. There are business licenses as well. They could go and investigate a complete security business, risk management business, firearms business, investigation business. They can also go and investigate industry associations. Now, if an industry association has a member that does something wrong and the other members find out about it and they drag that organisation into disrepute, the industry association has to do something about it because they have membership rules. Now, down in Victoria, an organisation that's subject to licensing by the Victorian Police Licensing Regulation Division 18 months ago got itself into strife with another organisation that's subject to scrutiny by the Licensing Regulation Division, and one of them is a member of an industry association. The Licensing Regulation Division also ensure that security business firms in Victoria are licensed and that they are members of an industry association. If one of those firms does the wrong thing by the LRD's rules and regulations with its membership, the LRD has to investigate that, and so does the industry association. The industry association, no matter what size the organisation, has to enforce their membership rules, otherwise they look like they are supporting the actions of the non-compliant member with the security business firm registered with the LRD in Victoria. So that is a major problem for that industry association. Other members are going to say, well, hang on, this tars us with the same brush. Why aren't you doing something to one of the biggest members of this industry association in Australia? The LRD, they will. So the industry association are going to have to swallow the hard pill and enforce its rules and regulations for members. Otherwise, being a member of it, the peak body for security in Australia, is worthless to the other members. So this is the sort of thing that's unpalatable and hard to swallow, that makes licensing regulation authorities so hard on the rules and regulations for what they're in charge of regulating. Because if they don't, it's just a free-for-all for anybody that wants to rip off widowed farmers for $30,000, anybody who wants extortion for $26,666 and another $40,000 later, and anybody that wants to conspire to beat the system in any state or territory through a workaround project that they can't do. Things like unregistered trainers, who issued the USIs, how many people there were involved in it, what was the agreement, was there a written agreement as required by ASQA? Why are these people not listed as approved trainers in Victoria? They did the training, you issued the certificates. All that sort of thing creates a real mess that's going to tie up a regulatory authority investigator for a whole week. Because it's not hard to investigate. It's all there registered under Standard 9 and with USIs, all that sort of thing. So regulatory authorities don't deal mostly, as I said before, with investigators who conduct investigations for the Transport Accident Commission, for the Building Commission, for the WorkSafe Victoria, who are members of an industry association, right, who do the right thing, because complaints about them are absolutely minimal. And complaints about their members are minimal. But when a complaint comes through of non-compliant behaviour, the regulatory authority has to make sure justice is not only done, it is also seen to be done. So complaints are bigger than the individual lone private investigator. They affect the investigation business, they affect the investigation association, they affect the licensed private investigator, and they have a ripple effect throughout the industry all through Australia. So good on the Licensing Regulation Division on being so hard on it and equally across the board for everybody, regardless of their size, income, and importance. I reckon it's a very difficult job to do, and they do it quite well. I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy. Be back later on with another episode of Spy Curious for our live training for CPP 30619. See you then.